What would you do if an entire town decided your son didn't belong there anymore, but they had no idea who his father really was? And what if the quiet man they mocked at the edge of town wasn't just another struggling single dad, but a ghost from America's deadliest military operations? Stay until the end of this story, because the final confrontation will reveal a secret so terrifying that the people hunting this teenage boy will wish they had never said his name out loud. The town of Blackwater Ridge looked peaceful from a distance. It was the kind of small southern town that appeared in postcards during election seasons. Quiet streets, old churches, American flags hanging from porches, smiling faces at diners where everybody supposedly knew everybody. But places like Blackwater Ridge survived on appearances. Beneath the politeness lived generations of bitterness, suspicion, and unwritten rules about who belonged and who didn't. 16-year-old Elijah Carter learned that during his very first week at Blackwater Ridge High. The insults started small at first. Long stares in the hallway. Whispered comments during class. Students bumping into him without apologizing. Teachers pretending not to notice when someone called him city trash under their breath. Elijah had moved there only 2 months earlier with his father after they left Chicago following his mother's death. Since then, everything in his life felt disconnected, like he was living inside somebody else's story instead of his own. His father, Marcus Carter, barely talked about why they moved. He simply bought an old house outside town near the woods and kept to himself. Most people assumed Marcus was just another quiet black veteran trying to disappear from his past. They saw the scars on his hands, the stiffness in his walk, the way he scanned every room before sitting down. But nobody in Blackwater Ridge understood what those habits actually meant. Marcus Carter had spent 18 years inside some of the most dangerous combat zones on Earth. Officially, he didn't exist in most military records available to the public. Unofficially, men like him were whispered about inside intelligence circles with a strange mix of fear and respect. During his years as a Navy SEAL team leader attached to classified operations, Marcus had rescued diplomats, dismantled terrorist compounds, survived torture overseas, and buried more teammates than he cared to remember. But after losing his wife Angela to cancer 3 years earlier, Marcus walked away from that life permanently. Or at least he tried to. Now all he wanted was peace. But peace is difficult to find in places built on hatred. One Friday afternoon, Elijah stayed late after basketball practice. He wasn't even on the team officially yet, but Coach Daniels had noticed his talent almost immediately. Elijah was fast, disciplined, and mentally tougher than most teenagers his age. That came from Marcus. His father believed weakness attracted danger, so Elijah grew up learning discipline before almost anything else. As Elijah walked home through the old industrial road near Miller's Creek, a pickup truck slowed beside him. Loud country music blasted from the open windows while 4 older boys stared at him from inside the truck. Elijah recognized them immediately. Travis Reed, Cole Branson, Derek Vance, and the driver, Logan Pike, the sheriff's nephew and unofficial king of every violent rumor in town. Logan leaned out the window with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You lost, boy." Elijah kept walking. "I asked you something." Still Elijah ignored him. That was mistake number 1. The truck suddenly swerved in front of him, forcing Elijah backward toward the ditch. The boys jumped out laughing while gravel crunched beneath their boots. Travis carried a baseball bat over his shoulder casually like he'd done this before. "You think you're too good to answer people around here?" Logan asked. Elijah stayed calm, though his pulse quickened slightly. "My father told me not to waste time arguing with cowards." The smiles disappeared instantly. That was mistake number 2. Cole shoved Elijah hard in the chest. "Say that again." Elijah stumbled backward but stayed on his feet. For a brief moment, something strange happened inside him. Not fear. Calculation. Marcus had trained him since childhood how to stay calm under pressure. How to assess exits. How to read body language. How to survive. And unfortunately for these boys, Elijah learned very well. When Travis swung the baseball bat threateningly toward Elijah's shoulder, Elijah reacted automatically. He stepped sideways, grabbed Travis's wrist, and drove his elbow directly into the older boy's ribs with frightening precision. Travis collapsed screaming into the dirt before anyone fully understood what happened. Everything froze. Logan stared in disbelief. Elijah stared too, because in that moment, he realized something terrifying. His father's training had become instinct. Derek lunged next, throwing a wild punch. Elijah ducked under it and shoved him violently into the truck door. Cole backed away immediately now, uncertainty replacing confidence. But Logan wasn't finished. Humiliation burned in his face while Travis groaned on the ground clutching his ribs. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Logan hissed. Elijah breathed heavily but kept his voice controlled. "No," he replied quietly. "You did." Then Elijah walked away. But as the truck disappeared behind him a few minutes later, he noticed something chilling in the rear window. A symbol painted in white across the back windshield. A twisted variation of an old hate symbol his father once warned him about. And suddenly Elijah understood this wasn't just school bullying. This was something older. Something organized, something dangerous. That night Marcus noticed the bruise near Elijah's jaw immediately during dinner. "What happened?" Elijah hesitated. "Nothing." Marcus looked at him silently for several seconds. The kind of silence only fathers with military backgrounds mastered. Calm, focused, impossible to fool. Then Marcus slowly lowered his fork. "Try again." Elijah explained everything. The truck, the road, the threats, the symbol. And the moment Marcus heard about the symbol, something changed in his face instantly. Not fear, recognition. A dark stillness settled over him so suddenly that even Elijah noticed it. Marcus stood slowly and walked toward the kitchen window without speaking. Outside, rain had started falling softly across the property while darkness covered the woods surrounding their house. Finally Marcus spoke. "How many boys?" "4. Did you hurt them badly?" "I don't think so." Marcus nodded once. Then he asked the question that truly mattered to him. "Did they touch you first?" "Yes." Marcus stayed quiet for a long moment. Then finally, "You defended yourself correctly." Elijah frowned slightly. "You're not angry." Marcus turned toward him fully now. "Son, there's something you need to understand about places like this." His voice lowered carefully. "Some people mistake kindness for weakness. And when they do, eventually they test boundaries." Elijah could feel tension building beneath his father's calm exterior now. What was that symbol? Marcus's jaw tightened subtly. Trouble. Before Elijah could ask another question, headlights suddenly appeared outside the house. Both of them turned instantly toward the window. A truck had stopped, at the end of their driveway. Engine still running. Marcus's entire body changed in 1 second. Every movement sharpened. Every trace of softness vanished. Elijah had seen this transformation only once before after his mother died. The calm father disappeared, and something colder replaced him. A soldier. Marcus walked quietly toward the front door while staring into the darkness outside. Then another truck appeared behind the first one. And another behind that. Engines idling. Lights off. Elijah's heartbeat accelerated. "What's going on?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He simply opened a nearby drawer slowly. Inside sat a handgun Elijah had never seen before. Marcus checked it calmly with terrifying familiarity. Then he looked directly at his son. And for the first time all night, Elijah saw genuine danger in his father's eyes. "Go upstairs," Marcus said quietly. But now, outside, truck doors began opening one by one in the darkness. Heavy boots touched wet gravel. Voices laughed softly beyond the rain. And standing there in the dim light of the kitchen, Marcus Carter finally understood something he prayed would never happen again. The war he spent years trying to escape had just followed him home. With that said, thanks for watching and until next time. The sound of those truck doors opening outside changed the atmosphere inside the Carter house instantly. Not louder, not chaotic, worse, controlled, deliberate, like the men outside wanted Marcus to hear every boot touching gravel. Wanted him to understand this wasn't random intimidation from drunk teenagers anymore. This was organized, coordinated, a message. Elijah stood frozen near the staircase while rain tapped softly against the windows. "Dad." Marcus never looked away from the front door. "Upstairs," he repeated calmly. But now Elijah noticed something unsettling in his father's voice. Not fear. Focus. The same kind of focus Marcus used during shooting practice deep in the woods behind the house. The kind that made him unnaturally still. Elijah slowly backed toward the stairs. Outside, more laughter drifted through the darkness. Then came the first bang against the front gate. Metal rattled violently. Another bang followed. Then another. Marcus moved quietly through the living room, turning off lights one by one until the entire first floor fell into darkness except for the faint glow above the stove. Only then did Elijah finally understand something terrifying. His father wasn't reacting emotionally. He was preparing tactically. Marcus stepped toward the side window carefully and pulled the curtain aside barely an inch. 3 trucks. At least 8 men. Some older than the boys from the road earlier. One carrying a chain, another holding what looked like a tire iron. And standing beside the first truck was Sheriff Wade Pike, Logan's uncle. Marcus's expression hardened immediately. That told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't teenage stupidity anymore. This town protected its own poison. "Elijah," Marcus said quietly without turning around. "Listen carefully." Elijah stood halfway up the stairs now, heart pounding. "If I tell you to leave through the back woods, you run south until you hit the old train tracks. Don't stop for anybody. What about you?" Marcus ignored the question. "Do you understand?" "Yes." Another violent slam rattled the front gate outside. Then a voice shouted through the rain. "Come out here, boy." "Logan." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Not in fear. In disappointment, because deep down, part of him had hoped maybe this town was merely ignorant. But hatred rarely stays quiet once it believes authority supports it. The sheriff stepped forward now near the driveway entrance. "You got a problem in there, Marcus?" he called loudly. Marcus almost laughed hearing fake concern in the man's voice. Classic intimidation tactic. Appear official while allowing chaos to happen around you. Marcus had seen similar behavior overseas in corrupt villages protected by armed militias. Men pretending neutrality while quietly feeding violence from the shadows. Different country. Same sickness. He unlocked the front door slowly but didn't open it fully. Rain blew lightly through the narrow gap. Sheriff Pike smiled beneath his hat. "Evening." Marcus stared at him silently. Logan stood several feet behind the sheriff with swollen pride still burning across his face. "You raising your kid to attack people now?" Logan shouted. Marcus's eyes shifted toward him slowly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. "Careful," Marcus said softly. Not loud, not threatening, but something in his tone made even Logan hesitate slightly. Sheriff Pike stepped in quickly. "Now let's calm things down." Marcus looked directly at him. "You brought 8 men to my property in the middle of the night." The sheriff shrugged lightly. "Folks around here get protective when outsiders cause trouble." Outsiders. There it was. Marcus nodded once slowly. Then he noticed another symbol painted on the side of one truck. Same twisted marking Elijah described earlier. And suddenly an old memory surfaced violently inside him. Afghanistan. 2011. A classified joint operation targeting an extremist network hiding inside remote mountain compounds. Marcus remembered briefing documents discussing recruitment patterns used by hate-based organizations worldwide. Symbols, rituals, territorial intimidation, radicalization through local identity. Back then Marcus realized something important. Hatred always evolves the same way no matter where it's born. and standing here now in Blackwater Ridge. He recognized the pattern immediately. The sheriff leaned closer toward the doorway. Maybe your boy should apologize. Marcus looked at him for several seconds before answering. For defending himself. A few men near the trucks shifted uncomfortably now. Because unlike the sheriff and Logan, they weren't prepared for Marcus's calmness. Bullies survive on visible fear. They expect nervous voices, defensive explanations. Marcus gave them none. That uncertainty started spreading quietly through the group. Then Logan made mistake number one. He stepped forward aggressively. He broke Travis's ribs. Marcus's eyes locked onto him instantly. No, Marcus replied quietly. Your friend broke his ribs when he attacked someone he thought was weaker than him. Logan's face reddened. You think you're tough. Now Marcus smiled slightly for the first time all night. And somehow that smile frightened Elijah more than anger would have. Because it carried no emotion whatsoever. Just memory. You have no idea what tough looks like, Marcus said. Silence crashed across the driveway. Even the rain suddenly felt quieter. Sheriff Pike stepped forward again, tension rising now. You threatening my nephew? No, Marcus answered calmly. Another pause. Just educating him. One of the older men near the truck spat into the mud. We should teach both of them a lesson. Marcus heard it clearly. So did Elijah upstairs. And in that exact moment, something ancient woke fully inside Marcus Carter. For years after leaving the Navy SEALs, Marcus fought constantly to become normal again. To bury violence deep enough that his son would never inherit it. He avoided conflict, avoided attention, avoided becoming the man war trained him to be. But war changes people permanently. The skills remain sleeping, beneath the surface forever, waiting. Marcus opened the front door wider now and stepped onto the porch slowly. Rain soaked instantly into his dark shirt while every man near the driveway watched carefully. And suddenly Elijah noticed something strange happening outside. The men who arrived confident earlier were now studying Marcus differently. Because predators recognize danger instinctively, even before understanding it logically. Marcus stepped down one stair. Then another. Completely calm. Sheriff Pike frowned slightly now. Marcus, maybe we should all cool down. Too late for that. Marcus stopped near the bottom step. You brought masked men to my house at night, he said quietly. In front of my son. Nobody answered. Marcus continued walking forward slowly through the rain. And now you're standing on my property pretending this is a conversation. Logan laughed nervously. You think one man scares us? Marcus stopped moving. Then finally, for the first time all night, the former Navy SEAL allowed a tiny piece of his real self to surface. Not enough to lose control. Just enough. And when he spoke next, his voice carried something none of those men expected. Combat. I spent 18 years hunting groups bigger and meaner than this one, Marcus said softly. And every single one of them made the same mistake you're making now. The rain poured harder. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Marcus looked directly at Logan. You mistook restraint for weakness. A cold silence followed. Then one of the older men suddenly whispered something toward Sheriff Pike. What did he say he did? The sheriff looked uneasy now too. Because suddenly Marcus Carter no longer looked like an isolated black widower living outside town. Now he looked dangerous, trained, unreadable. And deep down, every instinct inside Sheriff Pike realized something horrifying. They may have just brought a mob to the home of a man built specifically to survive mobs. Rain continued pouring across the driveway while nobody moved. The confidence that arrived with those trucks had started fading now, replaced by something quieter and far more dangerous. Uncertainty. And Marcus Carter recognized it immediately. Because uncertainty is the first crack in every aggressive group. Once doubt enters, courage begins leaking out of people one by one. The older men near the trucks exchanged small glances now. Subtle, nervous. They came expecting intimidation, not resistance. Certainly not this kind of resistance. Marcus stood calmly in the rain, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. Not posturing, not bluffing. That frightened them most. Sheriff Wade Pike cleared his throat. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "nobody's looking for trouble tonight." Marcus stared at him silently for a moment. Then finally, "That's interesting." The sheriff shifted slightly. "Why's that?" "Because trouble drove all the way to my house." A few men lowered their eyes. Logan didn't. Humiliation still burned too deeply inside him after what happened on the road earlier. Men like Logan survived on reputation. And nothing destroys fragile egos faster than public embarrassment. Especially in front of other men. "You think this is over?" Logan snapped. Marcus looked at him calmly. "No," he answered honestly. "I think this is beginning." That answer unsettled everybody. Because Marcus wasn't speaking emotionally. He was stating fact. And people instinctively fear calm men who speak about violence without excitement. Sheriff Pike stepped forward quickly now, sensing control slipping away. "Let's all go home before somebody says something stupid." Marcus nodded slightly. "A good idea." For a second it looked like the situation might finally end. Peacefully. Then Travis Reed climbed slowly out of the second truck. His ribs were wrapped awkwardly beneath his soaked jacket, rage twisting across his face. The second Elijah saw him, his stomach tightened. Because injured pride is more dangerous than confidence. Travis pointed directly toward the house. "That little punk attacked me." "You attacked him first," Marcus replied. "He broke my damn ribs." Marcus's expression never changed. "Then next time don't threaten people with baseball bats." The men near the trucks shifted uncomfortably again. Because Marcus wasn't losing arguments. He was exposing them. And bullies hate exposure more than resistance. Travis looked toward Sheriff Pike desperately. "You just gonna let him talk to us like this?" The sheriff hesitated. That hesitation mattered. Because now cracks were appearing everywhere. Marcus noticed it immediately. This group wasn't unified by loyalty. It was unified by permission. And permission disappears the second consequences become real. Then Logan made mistake number 2. He stepped forward into the rain and pulled something from his waistband. A handgun. Not pointed directly yet, but visible. Elijah's breath caught upstairs. Several men instantly backed away slightly. Even Sheriff Pike looked shocked. "Logan," he barked sharply. "Put that away." But Logan wasn't listening anymore. His face had gone pale with humiliation and adrenaline. "You think you can come here and disrespect us?" He shouted toward Marcus. Marcus's eyes dropped briefly to the weapon. And suddenly everything about him changed. The porch, the rain, the tension, it all disappeared behind his eyes. Combat instinct took over completely. Elijah saw it happen in real time. His father's posture shifted almost invisibly. Breathing slowed. Focus sharpened into something cold and terrifyingly precise. Not fear. Preparation. Marcus took one slow step forward. "Son," he said quietly to Logan, "if you point that weapon at me, tonight becomes the worst mistake of your life." Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed properly. Because the difference between Marcus and everyone else standing there was now painfully obvious. Only one man in that driveway truly understood violence. Logan raised the handgun slightly higher. And then something happened that Elijah would remember forever. Marcus smiled. Not a normal smile. Not arrogance. Recognition. Like a man seeing a familiar road he hoped never to walk again. "You have no training," Marcus said softly. "Your grip is wrong. Your fingers too tense. Your shoulders are tight, which means if you panic." He tilted his head slightly. "You'll miss your first shot." Logan's face drained completely. "How the hell?" "Because unlike you," Marcus interrupted calmly, "I've spent most of my life around weapons." A heavy silence settled across the driveway. Sheriff Pike stepped between them now. Everybody calmed down. Marcus never took his eyes off Logan. "Tell him to lower it." Logan's breathing became uneven now. Because suddenly he realized something horrifying. The man standing in front of him wasn't afraid of guns. And men who aren't afraid of guns are extremely dangerous. Finally, Sheriff Pike grabbed Logan's arm and forced the weapon downward. That's enough. Marcus relaxed slightly. Only slightly. But Elijah noticed immediately. His father had truly been seconds away from violence. Real violence. Not fighting. Not intimidation. The kind people don't walk away from. Sheriff Pike shoved Logan backward toward the trucks. We're leaving. Logan resisted. This ain't over. Marcus answered before anyone else could. You're right. Again, calm. Again, factual. And somehow that frightened them. More than threats would have. One by one, the men climbed back into the trucks. No laughter now. No confidence. Just tension. Engines started. Mud splashed beneath spinning tires. But before the first truck pulled away, Sheriff Pike lowered his window and looked directly at Marcus. You should think carefully about how you handle things around here. Marcus stepped closer through the rain. And you should think carefully about who you allow near my son. The sheriff held his stare for several seconds. Then the trucks disappeared into the darkness. Silence returned slowly. Only rain remained. Marcus stood motionless in the driveway long after the taillights vanished. Then finally Elijah came downstairs carefully. Dad. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He kept staring into the woods surrounding their property like he expected something else to emerge from the darkness. Eventually he spoke. That symbol on their trucks. Elijah waited. Marcus's jaw tightened subtly. I've seen groups like that before. Where? Marcus looked toward him slowly. In places where hate becomes stronger than law. A chill moved through Elijah's chest. You think they're dangerous? Marcus finally looked directly at his son now. And what Elijah saw in his father's eyes terrified him more than the trucks had. Because Marcus wasn't worried about himself. He was calculating risk, like a soldier preparing for escalation. Yes, Marcus said quietly. Then after a pause, and dangerous men become even more dangerous when they feel embarrassed. Elijah swallowed hard. What do we do? Marcus looked toward the dark road where the trucks disappeared. His expression hardened again. We prepare. That single word hung heavily in the room. Because Elijah suddenly realized something important. His father didn't believe tonight was the end of the problem. He believed tonight was merely the first move. And deep in the woods surrounding Blackwater Ridge, other men were already preparing their next one too. The next morning, Blackwater Ridge pretended nothing had happened. That was the first thing Elijah noticed. The town still opened its diners at sunrise. Church bells still echoed through the streets. Elderly couples still drank coffee outside Miller's General Store while pickup trucks rolled slowly through downtown like any other Saturday morning. Normal. Everything looked painfully normal. But Elijah understood something now that he hadn't understood before. Some towns survive by burying ugliness beneath routine. And Blackwater Ridge had years of practice doing exactly that. Marcus was already awake before sunrise. Elijah found him sitting alone at the kitchen table with an old black notebook open beside him. He wasn't drinking coffee, wasn't watching television, wasn't distracted. He was listening, to silence, to the woods outside, to patterns most people never notice. That unsettled Elijah more than if Marcus had openly panicked. Because calm preparation always means experience. Did you sleep? Elijah asked quietly. Marcus looked up slowly. A little. That was a lie. Elijah could tell. The bruise near his father's temple looked darker this morning beneath the kitchen light, and his eyes carried the distant look they always had after nightmares about the war. But Marcus never talked about those nightmares. Instead, he closed the notebook calmly. You still planning to go to school Monday? Elijah hesitated. After last night, the idea felt dangerous. I don't know. Marcus studied him carefully. Then finally, if you stop living your life because people threaten you, they already own part of you. Elijah looked down silently. Marcus softened slightly now. But confidence doesn't mean stupidity either. What's that supposed to mean? It means you stay alert. Marcus stood and walked toward the back door. Come outside. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving cold fog drifting across the woods behind the house. Everything smelled wet and heavy. Marcus walked several yards away from the porch before stopping. Then he pointed toward the muddy ground. What do you see? Elijah frowned. Footprints. How many? Elijah crouched lower now. At first they looked random. But then he noticed something disturbing. Multiple boot prints. Fresh. Near the tree line. They came back. Elijah asked quietly. Marcus nodded once. After the trucks left, a cold feeling moved through Elijah's chest. They were watching the house. Yes. How long? Marcus looked toward the woods. Long enough. Elijah suddenly felt exposed standing there in daylight. Like invisible eyes could still be hidden somewhere beyond the trees. Marcus noticed immediately. Good, he said quietly. Elijah frowned. Good. You're starting to understand awareness. Marcus stepped toward the footprints. Most people move through life assuming danger announces itself loudly. He pointed toward the woods. Real danger usually watches first. Elijah stayed silent. Then he asked the question sitting heavily in his chest since last night. Dad, who are these people? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out across the property with a distant expression, like memory itself had become dangerous. Finally he spoke. Years ago, before you were born, groups like this started growing quietly all over the country. Small at first, angry men gathering in isolated towns. Some just hateful, some violent, some organized enough to become something worse. Elijah listened carefully. Marcus continued. Most people ignored them because they seemed local. Harmless. But hatred spreads when nobody confronts it. A pause. And eventually, some of those groups started connecting to larger networks. Elijah's stomach tightened slightly. You think that's what this is? Marcus looked at him carefully. I think Sheriff Pike protects them. That answer landed hard. Because if law enforcement supported the group, then nobody in town was truly safe. Elijah looked toward the woods again. So what now? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Now we stop underestimating them. Later that afternoon Elijah insisted on going into town despite Marcus clearly disliking the idea. I can't hide inside forever, Elijah argued. Marcus stared at him silently for several seconds. Then finally nodded. Fine. Relief crossed Elijah's face briefly. But Marcus added one condition immediately. I'm coming with you. The drive into Blackwater Ridge felt different now. Every truck seemed suspicious. Every stare lingered too long. People who ignored Marcus before now openly watched him from sidewalks and gas stations. Word about last night had spread quickly. Small towns survive on gossip the same way forests survive on rain. By the time they reached Miller's General Store, conversations inside nearly stopped completely. Elijah felt the tension instantly. Old men near the coffee counter stared openly now. A woman pushing a shopping cart quickly grabbed her child's hand and moved away from them. Marcus ignored all of it. But Elijah noticed something else. His father wasn't casually shopping. He was scanning exits, watching reflections in windows, measuring distances automatically. That's when Elijah fully realized. Marcus never stopped being a Navy SEAL. He merely stopped wearing the uniform. As they walked down one aisle, an older employee approached nervously. Marcus. Marcus looked up calmly. The man hesitated before speaking again. You should probably leave town for a while. Elijah frowned immediately. Marcus remained unreadable. Why? The employee lowered his voice. People are angry. Marcus almost smiled hearing that. People, he repeated softly. The man swallowed hard. There was a meeting last night after what happened. Marcus's eyes sharpened instantly. What kind of meeting? The employee glanced around carefully first. Then, the Klan. Elijah felt cold instantly hearing the words spoken out loud for the first time. The employee continued nervously. They blame your boy for embarrassing them. Marcus stepped slightly closer now. Where was this meeting? I shouldn't even be telling you this. Where? The man hesitated, then finally whispered, "Old timber mill outside Hollow Creek." Marcus nodded once slowly. Then something subtle changed in his posture. Not anger. Decision. The employee noticed too. "You need to be careful," he warned quietly. "These aren't just drunk idiots anymore." Marcus looked directly at him. "I know exactly what they are." As the man hurried away, Elijah turned toward his father. "What are you thinking?" Marcus stared silently toward the front windows of the store. Outside, 2 trucks had just parked across the street. Logan Pike stepped out slowly alongside Travis Reed and several older men Elijah didn't recognize. They weren't smiling this time. They looked focused, prepared. Marcus watched them carefully for several seconds. Then he spoke quietly without looking at Elijah. "We're leaving." But before they could move toward the exit, the store doors opened again. And every conversation inside the building died instantly. Because the man who entered wasn't just another town bully. He was enormous, tall, gray-bearded, cold-eyed. A faded military tattoo stretched along one arm beneath his flannel sleeve. And the moment Marcus saw him, his entire body froze. Not in fear, recognition. The older man stopped walking too. For several long seconds, both men stared at each other across the silent store. Then the stranger spoke first. And his voice carried something deeply dangerous beneath the calm. "Well," he said slowly, "I'll be damned." Marcus's jaw tightened instantly. Because standing there in front of him was someone from his old life. The entire store felt frozen in place. Nobody moved. Nobody even pretended to shop anymore. Every eye shifted between Marcus Carter and the massive gray-bearded stranger standing near the entrance. Even Logan Pike looked confused now. Because whatever was happening here clearly had nothing to do with local intimidation anymore. This was something older, personal, dangerous. Marcus stared at the man silently while years of buried memory slammed back into him all at once. Afghanistan. Dust storms. Gunfire echoing through mountain valleys. Bodies carried onto helicopters at midnight. And one name spoken repeatedly through classified briefings like a warning. Victor Hale. Former military contractor. Former special operations attachment. A man so violent even soldiers avoided discussing him casually. Officially, Victor worked private security overseas after leaving military service years earlier. Unofficially, men like Victor existed in the shadows between war and criminality. Marcus hadn't seen him in over 12 years. And he immediately understood something horrifying. Victor Hale did not belong in Blackwater Ridge by accident. Victor smiled slowly. "Still alive," he said. Marcus's expression remained cold. Unfortunately for some people, Victor laughed quietly at that. But there was no warmth in it. Only tension. The older man took several steps forward now. Boots heavy against the wooden floor. Logan approached beside him carefully. "You know this guy?" Victor never looked away from Marcus. "Oh, we know each other." Elijah felt his stomach tighten. Because his father had changed again. Not emotionally. Strategically. Every muscle in Marcus's body looked prepared now, like part of him expected violence at any second. Victor finally turned his attention toward Elijah. And the moment he did, Marcus stepped slightly in front of his son automatically. A small movement, but deliberate, protective. Victor noticed immediately. His smile widened slightly. "That your boy?" Marcus didn't answer. Victor nodded slowly to himself. "Looks like Angela." The mention of Elijah's mother hit the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Marcus's eyes darkened instantly. "You don't get to say her name." Victor shrugged. "Still touchy, huh?" Logan looked increasingly uncomfortable now. Because this wasn't the reaction he expected from Marcus. Until now, Logan viewed him as some quiet outsider with military history. But Victor Hale clearly saw something else. Something serious enough to respect carefully. And Logan wasn't smart enough to understand what that meant yet. Victor finally looked around the silent store. "Funny world," he said casually. "You spend years surviving war zones overseas, then end up hiding in a town like this?" Marcus's voice lowered dangerously. "I'm not hiding." Victor smiled again. "That's not what I heard." A heavy silence followed. Elijah glanced between them, realizing he was watching two men communicate through history nobody else in the room understood. And whatever existed between them, it was bad, very bad. Victor finally folded his arms. "You know these people?" he asked, gesturing slightly toward Logan and the others. Marcus answered honestly. "Unfortunately, they seem upset." Marcus looked directly at Logan now. "They threatened my son." Victor's expression changed slightly at that. Not softer. Interested. He slowly turned toward Logan. "You threatened his son?" Logan hesitated. "We were just teaching the kid respect." Victor stared at him for several seconds. Then quietly, "That's a mistake." Logan frowned immediately. "What's that supposed to mean?" Victor looked back toward Marcus. "It means if Marcus Carter wanted you hurt," he smiled faintly, "you wouldn't still be standing." The room went dead silent. Even Sheriff Pike, who had just entered through the front doors, froze hearing those words. Marcus hated this already. Because Victor Hale never said anything casually. Everything was manipulation, control, psychological positioning, and right now Victor was intentionally raising tension. Sheriff Pike stepped forward cautiously. "Everything all right here?" Victor glanced toward him lazily. "No." The sheriff stiffened slightly. Victor walked slowly through the store until he stood only a few feet away from Marcus now. Close enough that Elijah could feel the pressure radiating between them. Then Victor spoke quietly enough that only Marcus and Elijah clearly heard. "You picked the wrong town to disappear in." Marcus kept his face unreadable. "And you picked the wrong town to visit." Victor's smile faded slightly now. "Good." That meant Marcus struck something real. For the first time since entering the store, Victor no longer looked amused. He looked focused. "You think I'm your problem here?" Victor asked softly. Marcus didn't answer. Victor leaned slightly closer. "You have no idea what's growing in this place." Elijah felt a chill move through him instantly. Because Victor didn't sound like a man exaggerating. He sounded concerned. And men like Victor Hale do not scare easily. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you talking about?" Victor glanced briefly toward Logan, Travis, and the others. Then back toward Marcus. "You remember the networks we tracked overseas?" Marcus stayed silent. Victor lowered his voice further. "They're evolving." A pulse of cold recognition moved through Marcus instantly. Because he knew exactly what Victor meant. Extremist recruitment structures. Localized radical groups connecting through encrypted national networks. Small-town hate organizations turning into coordinated domestic operations. Marcus encountered similar patterns during classified counterterrorism work overseas years ago. Only now, it sounded like those same structures were forming here at home. Sheriff Pike stepped closer now, clearly irritated. "Victor, we got no problems here." Victor slowly looked at him. And suddenly the entire atmosphere shifted again. Because now Victor smiled the same way Marcus had smiled last night outside the house. Calm, empty, dangerous. "You should be careful saying that around me, Sheriff." Pike frowned. "And why's that?" Victor tilted his head slightly. "Because unlike most people in this town, I know exactly what problems look like." Nobody spoke. The silence became unbearable. Then Victor turned back toward Marcus one final time. "Take your son and leave Blackwater Ridge." Marcus's expression hardened instantly. "No." Victor studied him carefully. "That wasn't advice." Marcus stepped closer now too. For a terrifying second Elijah thought both men might explode into violence right there inside the store. But Marcus simply answered quietly. "I spent too much of my life running toward other people's wars." He looked directly into Victor's eyes. "I'm not running from this one." Victor stared at him for several long seconds. Then finally nodded once. Not approval, recognition, like he expected that answer all along. As Victor turned toward the exit, he paused beside Elijah briefly. Then he said something that made Elijah's blood run cold. "Your father was one of the deadliest men I ever met." Marcus's jaw tightened immediately. Victor continued walking. But the dangerous part isn't what he can do. He stopped near the door and looked back one last time. It's what happens when someone gives him a reason. Then Victor Hale disappeared into the rain outside. And for the first time since moving to Blackwater Ridge, the entire town finally understood something horrifying about Marcus Carter. The quiet widower living near the woods was not a victim trapped in their town. He was a predator trying very hard not to become one again. After Victor Hale left the store, nobody spoke for several seconds. The silence felt heavy now. Different, because fear had entered the room. Not fear of Marcus losing control. Fear of discovering who he really was. Logan Pike tried to laugh first, but it sounded forced. "That old man's crazy." Nobody answered him, not even his friends. Because they all saw the same thing. Victor Hale, a man intimidating enough to silence entire rooms just by walking into them, had treated Marcus Carter with extreme caution. And dangerous men do not act cautiously without reason. Marcus placed a hand lightly on Elijah's shoulder. "We're leaving." Neither Sheriff Pike nor Logan tried stopping them this time. That alone told Marcus everything. The balance had shifted slightly. Not enough. But enough to create hesitation. And hesitation matters. Outside, cold wind pushed rain across the empty parking lot while Marcus guided Elijah toward the truck quickly. Elijah waited until they were inside before speaking. "Who was that?" Marcus started the engine silently. Then finally, "A man I hoped never to see again." That doesn't answer the question. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly for a moment. Years ago, he could discuss missions casually with teammates because they understood the cost already. But talking about that life with his son felt different. Dangerous. Like opening doors better left closed. He worked with special operations teams overseas, Marcus said carefully. Military. Sometimes. Elijah frowned. "What does that mean?" Marcus pulled onto the road slowly. "It means some people fight wars without uniforms." That answer unsettled Elijah immediately. The woods blurred past outside while tension lingered heavily inside the truck. Finally Elijah asked the question that mattered most. Was he telling the truth? Marcus glanced toward him briefly. "About what?" "That you were one of the deadliest men he ever met." Marcus's jaw tightened subtly. "No." Relief crossed Elijah's face for half a second. Then Marcus finished. "I was worse back then." The truck fell silent again. Elijah looked at his father differently now. Not just as a parent, but as someone carrying parts of himself hidden behind locked doors. And suddenly Elijah understood something important. Marcus wasn't simply trying to protect him from danger. He was trying to protect him from becoming familiar with violence. When they finally reached home, Marcus immediately walked the perimeter of the property before even entering the house. Checking tracks, tree lines, sight angles. Elijah watched carefully now, seeing everything differently after meeting Victor Hale. His father moved like a man trained to expect attacks from invisible places. And maybe he always had. That evening, Marcus opened the old black notebook again at the kitchen table. Only this time Elijah noticed names written inside. Dates, symbols, locations. "What is that?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "Contingencies." Elijah frowned. "For what?" Marcus looked directly at him now. "For if this gets worse." A cold feeling settled in Elijah's stomach. Because his father didn't say, "if they attack." He said, "when this escalates." Meaning Marcus already believed escalation was inevitable. Then suddenly headlights appeared outside again. Both of them froze instantly. But this time it wasn't trucks. Only one vehicle. An old dark SUV. Marcus stood slowly. Elijah noticed his father's eyes narrow immediately. Recognition. "Who is it?" Elijah asked. Marcus's voice lowered. "Trouble." A woman stepped out of the SUV wearing a long dark coat despite the rain. Early 40s. Sharp eyes. Controlled posture. She moved with the same quiet awareness Marcus carried, which meant only one thing: military, or intelligence. Marcus opened the front door before she even knocked. "You shouldn't be here," he said immediately. The woman removed wet gloves calmly. "And it's good to see you too, Marcus." Elijah stared between them in confusion. The woman noticed him immediately. "That your son?" Marcus didn't answer. The woman nodded slowly. "He has Angela's eyes." Marcus's face hardened instantly again. "You don't get to use her memory as an introduction." The woman sighed quietly, still angry. "You vanished for 11 years. And you disappeared completely." Tension filled the doorway. Finally Marcus stepped aside reluctantly. The woman entered slowly, scanning the room automatically before sitting down. Again Elijah noticed it instantly. She assessed exits first. Same training, same instincts. Marcus remained standing. "What do you want, Naomi?" So her name was Naomi. Naomi leaned forward slightly. "I heard Victor Hale surfaced here." Marcus's eyes sharpened. "How?" A faint smile crossed her face. "Because some of us still monitor dangerous men." Elijah spoke carefully now. "Who are you?" Naomi looked toward him. "An old friend of your father." Marcus immediately corrected her. "No, an old handler." Elijah's stomach tightened again. "Handler." Naomi ignored Marcus's tone. "I worked intelligence support for joint operations overseas." Elijah looked toward his father slowly. "You were intelligence?" Marcus answered quietly. "No, Naomi did. He was the part intelligence called after diplomacy failed." Silence filled the room. Marcus looked exhausted now, not physically, emotionally, like his past was crawling out of graves one piece at a time. Naomi reached into her coat and placed a folder onto the kitchen table. Marcus stared at it without touching it. "What is this?" A warning. That single word changed the atmosphere instantly. Marcus slowly opened the folder. Inside were photographs, symbols, maps, surveillance images, and one photo in particular made Marcus go completely still. An image of Logan Pike standing beside several older men near a burning cross deep in the woods. Elijah's breath caught. Naomi's voice lowered. "This isn't just local racism anymore." Marcus kept staring at the photo silently. Naomi continued. "They're connected to a larger extremist network operating across multiple states." Marcus finally looked up. "How large?" Naomi hesitated. "Large enough that federal agencies started monitoring them 6 months ago." Elijah felt cold all over now. "You mean terrorists?" Naomi answered carefully. "Domestic extremist cells." Marcus closed the folder slowly. "And Victor?" Naomi's expression darkened slightly. "He's hunting them." That answer surprised Marcus instantly. "Why?" Naomi looked directly into his eyes. "Because they recruited someone connected to his old team." A long silence followed. Then Naomi added the part that truly changed everything. "And now they know you're here too." Marcus's expression hardened immediately. "How?" Naomi gave a bitter smile. "Because Blackwater Ridge has been on their radar for months." She paused. "The moment Logan Pike picked a fight with your son, your name started spreading through channels." Elijah looked toward his father. "What channels?" Marcus answered quietly without looking away from Naomi. "The kind connected to violence." Naomi nodded once. "Marcus, these people aren't playing small-town games anymore." She pointed toward the folder. "They're organizing, recruiting, training." A terrible silence settled over the kitchen now. Then Naomi finally said the sentence Marcus feared most. "And according to intercepted communications." She paused. "They've already marked your family as targets." The words hung in the kitchen like smoke. "They've already marked your family as targets." Elijah felt the room turn colder instantly. Marcus didn't react outwardly at first. That was what frightened Naomi most about him all those years ago during overseas operations. When ordinary men heard danger approaching, emotion surfaced first. Not Marcus. Marcus became quieter. And quiet men with combat training are dangerous in ways most people never understand. He slowly closed the folder in front of him. When? Naomi answered carefully. 3 nights ago. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. That fast? They moved faster after the incident on the road. Elijah looked between them both. You're saying those guys outside the school are part of some national extremist group? Naomi nodded once. Not officially organized under one name yet. But connected, coordinated, radicalized through encrypted channels. Marcus leaned back slowly in his chair. His mind was already moving several steps ahead now. Routes, escalation patterns, behavioral structures, target selection. He'd studied groups like this overseas for years. And the most dangerous phase of any extremist movement was always the same. The transition from ideology to action. Naomi reached into the folder again and removed another photograph. This one showed an abandoned warehouse deep in the woods. We believe they've been using this place for meetings and weapons storage. Marcus stared at the image. Hollow Creek Timber Mill. Naomi looked surprised. You know it. A local employee mentioned it earlier. Naomi nodded grimly. Then our intel matches. Elijah's stomach tightened. Weapons storage. Meetings. Targets. This wasn't random racism anymore. This was organized hatred becoming operational. Marcus looked toward Naomi carefully now. If federal agencies know all this, why hasn't anybody shut them down? Naomi gave a tired smile. Because proving extremist intent before violence happens is difficult. She paused. And some local officials keep interfering. Sheriff Pike. Marcus understood immediately. Protection from inside law enforcement. Again. Different country. Same disease. Naomi continued. Some agencies wanted to wait longer before moving. Marcus's eyes darkened slightly. And now Naomi hesitated. That hesitation alone told Marcus the answer would be bad. Now they're worried about retaliation. Elijah frowned. Retaliation against who? Naomi looked directly at him. Your father. Silence filled the room. Marcus remained perfectly still. Naomi continued carefully. Marcus, Victor Hale's appearance changed things. Marcus's voice lowered slightly. Explain. Your history surfaced. Elijah looked toward his father instantly. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Too late. Naomi went on. Once certain people discovered who you actually were, discussions inside those networks escalated. What kind of discussions? Marcus asked. Naomi slid one final document across the table. Marcus read it silently. Then his expression hardened into something colder than Elijah had ever seen before. What is it? Elijah asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer. Naomi did. It's a threat assessment. Elijah frowned. For who? Naomi looked directly at him. For your father. Marcus slowly placed the document back onto the table. Elijah reached toward it before Marcus stopped him immediately. No, but Elijah already saw enough. One sentence, highlighted in red, greater than subject Carter identified as prior tier military asset. Extreme force authorization discussed if resistance occurs. Elijah felt sick instantly. What does that mean? Marcus answered quietly. It means they know I won't scare easily. Naomi's face darkened. It means some people inside that network believe killing you may become necessary. The room went silent again. Not dramatic silence, heavy silence. The kind where reality finally becomes impossible to ignore. Elijah looked at his father differently now. Not because Marcus was a Navy SEAL. Not because of violence. But because for the first time, Elijah realized his father's past could get them both killed. Marcus stood slowly and walked toward the kitchen window. Outside, darkness had settled fully over the woods again. Years ago, Marcus learned something during combat deployments. True danger rarely announces itself loudly once it becomes serious. It becomes patient, calculated, and that was exactly what this felt like now. Naomi watched him carefully. You need to leave town tonight. Marcus didn't turn around. No, Marcus, no. His voice stayed calm, but final. Naomi stood too. This isn't Afghanistan. You can't solve this. Yourself. Marcus almost laughed at that. Because Afghanistan had rules. Clear enemies. Clear missions. This was uglier. Hatred hiding behind American flags and local politics. Violence disguised as patriotism. And children caught in the middle of it. Marcus finally turned back toward her. "If I leave now," he said quietly, "they'll follow eventually." Naomi stayed silent, because she knew he was right. Men radicalized by ideology don't stop once fear succeeds. They escalate. Marcus looked toward Elijah now. And suddenly Elijah saw something painful in his father's eyes for the first time all night. Guilt. Marcus blamed himself, not for moving them here, for believing he could escape his past completely. Naomi spoke carefully. "There's another option." Marcus already disliked the tone in her voice. "What option?" "We bring in federal response teams early." Marcus's face hardened immediately. "No, Marcus. You flood this town with agents and tactical units before they act." He shook his head slowly. "And people die." Naomi crossed her arms. "You think they won't die anyway?" Marcus didn't answer. Because honestly, he didn't know anymore. Then suddenly a sound echoed faintly from outside. A metallic clank somewhere near the back of the property. Marcus reacted instantly. The transformation was immediate. Every trace of conversation vanished from him. "Soldier." Naomi heard it too. Both of them moved simultaneously toward the lights. Elijah's pulse exploded. What was that? Marcus grabbed the handgun from the kitchen counter calmly. Naomi reached beneath her coat. Another weapon. Elijah stared in disbelief. These people moved like they'd done this together before. Marcus looked toward him sharply. "Stay inside this room." But now, another sound echoed outside. Closer this time. Movement near the woods. Naomi stepped beside Marcus near the back window carefully. "You expecting company?" Marcus's voice lowered dangerously. "No." That answer chilled Elijah instantly. Because if Marcus wasn't expecting someone, then whoever was outside was already a problem. The motion lights suddenly flickered on near the tree line. And for half a second, Elijah saw them. Figures. At least 4. Standing motionless near the woods. Watching the house. Then the lights went out again. Darkness swallowed everything. Naomi whispered quietly. They found the property faster than expected. Marcus's expression became terrifyingly calm. Not panic. Decision. Because now the threat had officially crossed a line. No more intimidation. No more warnings. They had come to the house again. At night. Armed. And deep inside Marcus Carter, something old and violent finally stopped trying to stay buried. Darkness covered the property again after the motion lights died. Nobody moved inside the kitchen. Nobody spoke. Even Elijah could feel it now. The atmosphere had shifted permanently. This was no longer tension. It was pre-contact silence. The kind Marcus remembered from overseas missions seconds before gunfire erupted in villages at 2 in the morning. Naomi stayed near the window, weapon drawn but controlled. "How many?" she whispered. Marcus stared into the darkness carefully. "At least 4. You think they're armed?" Marcus almost answered immediately. Then stopped himself. People like these often wanted fear first. Violence second. But either possibility was bad. "Yes," he said quietly. Elijah's heartbeat hammered inside his chest. He tried peering through the window again, but now the woods looked empty. Still. Silent. Marcus noticed. "They want us looking into the trees," he said softly. Naomi frowned slightly. "You think there's another angle?" Marcus nodded once. "Always." That answer barely finished leaving his mouth before glass shattered violently from the front of the house. Elijah flinched instinctively. Marcus didn't. Because he already expected it. A bottle rolled across the living room floor trailing gasoline. Molotov. Marcus moved instantly. Faster than Elijah had ever seen a human being move before. He grabbed the bottle and hurled it back through the broken window less than 1 second before flames exploded across the front porch outside. A loud scream echoed from the yard. Someone outside had been standing too close. Naomi stared briefly in shock. Jesus Christ. Marcus ignored her completely now. Combat mode had fully taken over. Another object slammed against the side of the house. Then another. Glass shattered upstairs. Voices shouted from the darkness. "They're trying to flush us out," Naomi said. Marcus already knew. Extremist intimidation tactics. Overwhelm. Chaos. Fire. He'd seen similar attacks overseas used against civilians before militia raids. Only now it was happening on American soil. "Elijah," Marcus said sharply, "bathroom closet. Bottom shelf." Elijah sprinted instantly. Inside the closet sat a black emergency bag he'd never seen before. Prepared. Of course it was prepared. "Bring it." Another crash exploded from the back of the house. Naomi fired once toward the woods. The gunshot ripped through the night like thunder. Outside movement scattered immediately. Marcus opened the emergency bag quickly after Elijah returned. Inside were medical supplies, flashlights, a radio, a combat knife, and ammunition. Elijah stared at it in disbelief. "You had this ready." Marcus loaded another magazine calmly. "I learned a long time ago that peace doesn't last because you want it to." Another bottle ignited outside near the garage. Flames climbed instantly. Smoke began drifting across the property. Naomi looked toward Marcus carefully now. "We need extraction." Marcus shook his head immediately. "No time. Marcus, they're not trying to kill us yet." Elijah stared at him. "What?" Marcus's eyes stayed fixed toward the windows. "They're testing response." Naomi slowly realized he was right. This wasn't a coordinated assault. Not yet. This was escalation through intimidation. See how the target reacts. Measure resistance. Marcus had participated in enough counterinsurgency operations to recognize the pattern instantly. And unfortunately for the people outside, they picked the wrong target for psychological warfare. A voice suddenly shouted from the darkness near the woods. "Come outside, Logan Pike." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Stupid kid." Naomi moved toward another window carefully. "There's more than 4 now." Marcus nodded slightly. "They called reinforcements." Another voice shouted. "You think you scare us because you were military." Marcus stepped toward the broken front window slowly. Then he spoke loudly enough for the yard to hear. "No." Silence outside. Marcus continued calmly. "I scare you because unlike you, I actually understand violence." The yard went quiet again. Because even hidden behind darkness and numbers, people instinctively recognize certainty. And Marcus Carter sounded certain. Logan shouted again angrily. "You killed Travis." Elijah's stomach dropped instantly. Marcus's expression darkened. "What?" Naomi looked sharply toward him. "You didn't know." Another voice from outside screamed. "He died on the way to the hospital." Everything froze. Even the fire crackling outside suddenly sounded distant. Elijah stared at his father in shock. Marcus stood completely still. Not fear. Calculation. Because now everything made sense. The escalation. The fury. The urgency. This was no longer retaliation over embarrassment. Someone had died. And whether justified or not, the town would blame Elijah. Marcus spoke carefully toward the darkness. "Your friend attacked my son with a weapon. He's dead." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He didn't sound happy. Didn't sound victorious. Only tired. Because he understood something the men outside didn't yet. Death changes conflict permanently. Naomi lowered her weapon slightly. This just became federal-level critical. Marcus nodded once slowly. Outside, engines roared in the distance. More trucks approaching. Fast. Too many. Naomi looked toward the road. Marcus. He already knew. This wasn't random anymore. The clan had crossed fully into mob mentality. And mobs become monsters the moment they convince themselves death justifies revenge. Marcus looked toward Elijah. "You listen to me very carefully now." Elijah's breathing shook slightly. This situation is no longer about surviving intimidation. Marcus stepped closer. These people believe they're at war now. Another truck screeched outside near the driveway. Then another. Voices everywhere. At least 20 men now. Some armed, some drunk on rage. Firelight flickered across the trees while smoke rolled through the property. Elijah felt genuine fear for the first time. Not because of the mob. Because of his father. Marcus looked different now. Colder. Focused beyond emotion. The version of him war created was no longer hiding. Naomi noticed it too. And honestly, it frightened her almost as much as the men outside. "Marcus," she said carefully, "don't disappear into that headspace again." He looked at her briefly. Too briefly. Then toward the growing mob outside. "I was hoping not to." A gunshot suddenly exploded through the darkness. Then another. Bullets ripped into the side of the house. Elijah ducked instantly. Naomi cursed. But Marcus didn't flinch. Because somewhere deep inside him, old instincts had fully awakened now. And the terrifying part wasn't that Marcus Carter remembered how to survive war. It was that war remembered him too. Gunfire tore through the side of the house again. Wood splintered. Glass exploded inward. Smoke drifted across the ceiling while flames outside reflected violently through broken windows. Elijah's breathing became uneven as he crouched near the kitchen wall. But Marcus Carter remained terrifyingly calm. Not because the situation wasn't dangerous. Because his mind had entered the state combat veterans fear most. Complete operational focus. Naomi recognized it immediately. Years ago during overseas missions, Marcus developed a reputation among intelligence teams for surviving situations that should have killed entire units. But the stories always carried the same warning afterward. Once Marcus switched fully into combat mode, he became emotionally unreachable. And right now Naomi could see it happening again. Another burst of gunfire ripped across the porch. Marcus finally moved. Not wildly. Not emotionally. Precisely. He stepped toward the broken front window, assessed the angle for less than 1 second, then fired twice into the darkness outside. 2 shots. That was all. But the effect was immediate. Screaming erupted near the driveway. Men scattered behind trucks instantly. Not dead. Disabled. Marcus always preferred disabling shots when possible. It sent stronger psychological messages. Naomi looked toward him sharply. "You hit them." Marcus reloaded calmly. "I warned them." Outside, chaos spread rapidly now. The mob expected fear, panic, begging. Instead they encountered something completely different. Resistance. From a man who clearly knew exactly what he was doing. And that realization shattered their confidence instantly. Logan Pike's voice screamed from behind one truck. "He shot them." Marcus answered loudly through the darkness. "You fired first." Another silence followed. Heavy. Unstable. Marcus stepped back from the window. "Elijah." "Yes." "Listen carefully." Even now Marcus's voice remained controlled. Measured. That somehow frightened Elijah more than yelling would have. "If I tell you to run," Marcus said, "you don't look back." Elijah's chest tightened instantly. "What about you?" Marcus ignored the question again. Naomi stepped closer. "We still have time to pull out through the south woods." Marcus shook his head. "No, Marcus. They're spread through the trees already." Naomi realized he was right. This wasn't a random angry crowd anymore. Someone outside understood containment positioning. And that meant at least one trained organizer was coordinating them. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. Victor Hale's warning suddenly made much more sense. "You have no idea what's growing in this place." Then another voice echoed outside. Not Logan. Older. Calmer. Marcus Carter. Marcus froze instantly hearing it. Because unlike the others, this voice carried discipline, experience, danger. Naomi noticed the reaction immediately. "You know him." Marcus stepped slowly toward the window again. And then he saw him. Standing near the trucks beneath flickering firelight. Tall. Broad shoulders. Military posture. A white extremist symbol stitched onto a black jacket. And scars running along his neck. Marcus felt cold recognition move through him instantly. "No way," he whispered. Naomi's face tightened. "Who is that?" Marcus stared into the darkness. "Ethan Cross." Naomi went pale immediately. "That's impossible." But it wasn't. Because Ethan Cross had once served beside Marcus years earlier during classified naval operations overseas. Until something broke inside him. Cross became obsessed with extremist ideology after multiple combat deployments. Angry, radicalized, violent, eventually discharged after attacking another operator during a mission briefing. Intelligence agencies lost track of him years ago. And now he stood outside Marcus's home leading a racist militia. Ethan's voice echoed again through the night. "You should have stayed buried, Marcus." Marcus stepped closer toward the broken window. "You should have stayed locked up." Ethan laughed softly. Still calm, still controlled. That frightened Marcus more than yelling would have. Because Ethan wasn't emotional. He was ideological now. And ideological men are among the most dangerous on earth. Outside, the mob quieted immediately around Ethan. That told Marcus everything. This wasn't Logan Pike's movement anymore. Logan was merely local muscle. Ethan Cross was the real infection. Naomi lowered her voice. "If he's here personally," she paused. "Then this operation matters to them." Marcus nodded once slowly. Years ago Ethan believed America was collapsing because of weakness, diversity, and political corruption. He became obsessed with building what he called restoration networks. At the time, most people dismissed him as another unstable veteran. Marcus never did, because Marcus understood something most civilians don't. Trained extremists are exponentially more dangerous than angry amateurs, especially when they learn patience. Ethan stepped closer through the smoke outside. "You know what's funny?" he called out. "All those years fighting overseas, and now you're protecting the exact kind of weakness we warned this country about." Elijah's fists tightened hearing that. Marcus's expression remained ice cold. "You always needed someone to blame for the war inside your own head." The mob shifted uneasily again. Because they weren't witnessing simple intimidation anymore. This felt personal, history-heavy, dangerous. Ethan smiled faintly. "You could have helped build something stronger." Marcus answered instantly. "No, you wanted to build something hateful." Ethan's eyes hardened now. "Same thing sometimes." Marcus's grip tightened around the handgun. "No," he said quietly. "Only cowards confuse them." Silence. Then Ethan slowly nodded. Still righteous. Marcus took another step toward the shattered window. Still broken. For the first time all night, Ethan's smile disappeared completely. "Good." Marcus hit something real. Outside, Logan shouted angrily again. "Why are we talking to him? Let's burn the place down." Ethan raised one hand slightly. Instant silence followed. Total obedience. That alone terrified Naomi. Because it confirmed command hierarchy. This group wasn't chaotic anymore. It was structured, militant. Ethan looked directly toward Marcus. "You know why I came personally." Marcus stayed silent. "Because they told me Marcus Carter disappeared after his wife died." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "I wanted to see if the old predator was truly gone." Marcus's voice lowered dangerously. "And," Ethan smiled again, "I think he's waking back up." The fire outside crackled loudly while smoke rolled across the yard. Then Ethan said the one thing Marcus feared most. "We're not leaving tonight." Elijah felt panic rise instantly. Naomi stepped beside Marcus carefully. "They're preparing for breach positions." Marcus already saw it. Movement spreading outward. Men flanking both sides of the property. Weapons passing between trucks. Ethan Cross wasn't here for intimidation anymore. He came to test Marcus directly. And deep down, Marcus understood exactly what this really was. Recruitment through violence. Ethan wanted to prove dominance over a former Navy SEAL publicly. Because if they could break Marcus Carter, they could radicalize every angry man in Blackwater Ridge permanently. Marcus looked toward Elijah one last time. Then toward Naomi. finally back toward the growing fire outside. And for the first time in years, Marcus Carter mentally prepared himself to go back to war. The moment Marcus Carter stopped treating this like a defensive situation, everything inside the house changed. Not louder, not more chaotic, more controlled. Naomi noticed it immediately. Because men like Marcus don't escalate emotionally. They transition from reactive to procedural, from defensive to operational. Marcus slowly lowered the handgun onto the kitchen counter. "Elijah," he said quietly. Elijah was still crouched near the wall, breathing unevenly. "Yes." Marcus didn't look at him directly at first. That alone made it worse. "Listen to me carefully." Elijah nodded. "If I give you a command tonight, you follow it immediately." No hesitation. Elijah swallowed. "Okay." Marcus finally looked at him now. "And you don't try to be brave." That word landed heavier than Elijah expected. Because it wasn't an insult. It was instruction. Naomi stepped closer. "Marcus, what are you planning?" Marcus's voice stayed calm. "I'm ending the leverage." Naomi frowned slightly. "What leverage?" Marcus glanced briefly toward the burning yard outside. Their belief that numbers decide outcomes. A distant explosion of gunfire echoed again from the trees. But this time, it was more controlled. Measured bursts. Flanking pressure. Ethan Cross was organizing them properly now. Naomi lowered her voice. "They're positioning for a full breach." Marcus nodded. "I know." Elijah looked between them. "A breach of what?" Naomi answered honestly. "The house." Elijah's stomach dropped. Marcus walked toward the back hallway slowly. "Then we don't let them establish it." Naomi followed him. "You're outnumbered at least 15 to 1. Marcus stopped briefly. "Then they've already made their first mistake." Naomi shook her head slightly. "You're not hearing me." Marcus turned toward her now. "I am." A pause. Then quieter. "And I've seen worse ratios than this." Elijah felt cold hearing that. Because it wasn't bravado. It was memory. Marcus moved into the hallway and opened a small locked cabinet Elijah had never seen before. Inside were compact tactical items. Nothing excessive. Nothing flashy. Just survival tools. Prepared long before tonight ever happened. Naomi stared at it. "You kept this." Marcus didn't answer immediately. Then, "I never stopped preparing." That statement alone explained more about his life than anything else. Elijah stepped closer. "Dad, what are you going to do?" Marcus finally looked at him fully. And this time, there was something different in his expression. Not anger. Not fear. Responsibility. "I'm going to make sure you leave this house alive if things go wrong." Elijah shook his head quickly. "No, I'm staying with you." Marcus's voice dropped immediately. "No." It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Naomi intervened softly. "Elijah, listen to him." Elijah looked between them both, frustrated and scared. Outside, another coordinated burst of gunfire cracked through the night. Closer now. Marcus moved quickly back into the living room. He pressed 2 fingers against the broken window frame, studying angles. Then he spoke without turning. "They're tightening the perimeter." Naomi stepped beside him. "How do you know?" Marcus pointed subtly into the darkness. "Because they stopped firing randomly." Elijah looked carefully. She was right. The chaos had shifted. Gunfire was no longer scattered. It was directional, intentional, covering movement. Ethan Cross was organizing them into a tactical advance. Naomi cursed quietly. "He's using military structure." Marcus nodded once. Yes, that single word carried weight. Because it meant this wasn't just a mob anymore. It was an improvised unit. Outside, Ethan's voice cut through the rain again. "Marcus Carter." Marcus stepped closer to the broken window. Ethan continued. "You can end this anytime. Walk out. Talk. No blood." Marcus answered calmly. "You already brought blood here." A pause. Then Ethan's voice returned, colder. "That wasn't me." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "That's not how responsibility works." Silence fell briefly outside. Then Ethan laughed softly. You still think like a soldier. Marcus replied instantly. I am a soldier. A beat. Then Ethan said something that changed the tone of everything. No, he replied. You're a relic pretending the world still has rules. That statement hung in the air. Naomi felt it immediately. This wasn't just hostility. This was ideology colliding with discipline. Marcus stepped slightly into the doorway now. Rain and smoke drifted across his face. You brought armed men to a civilian home, Marcus said quietly. And you think I'm the problem? Ethan's voice sharpened. You created this system overseas. We just brought it home. Elijah felt a chill. Marcus stayed silent. Because that accusation wasn't random. It was targeted. Ethan Cross wasn't just attacking Marcus physically. He was attacking his history. His identity. His moral framework. Naomi whispered carefully. He's trying to destabilize you. Marcus didn't respond. Because he already knew. Outside, movement intensified again. More boots in mud. More coordinated positioning. Elijah saw shadows moving between trees now. Closing in. Marcus turned toward Naomi. How many exits are still open? Naomi hesitated. 1. Marcus nodded. That's enough. Elijah looked alarmed. 1. That's it. Marcus finally faced him fully again. 1 is all you need if you move correctly. A sudden loud impact hit the back wall of the house. Followed by glass breaking upstairs. The breach had started. Elijah's breathing quickened. Naomi raised her weapon again. But Marcus remained still. Too still. Then he said quietly, now we decide how this ends. Another explosion of gunfire ripped across the front yard. Ethan Cross's voice echoed one final time through the smoke. Show me who you really are, Carter. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. Not in fear. In acceptance. Then he opened them again. And stepped forward into the doorway. Ready. Marcus stepped into the doorway, and for a moment, everything outside seemed to pause. Rain, smoke, firelight, movement in the trees. Even the gunfire seemed to hesitate, as if the night itself was watching to see what he would do next. Naomi stayed just behind him, weapon raised but controlled. Elijah remained frozen near the hallway entrance, unable to process how quickly everything had shifted from defense to something far more dangerous. Outside, Ethan Cross stood near the burning edge of the yard, partially lit by the flames consuming scattered debris. Behind him, men shifted through the darkness, forming loose but intentional positions around the property. A perimeter. A siege. Marcus observed all of it in seconds. Then he spoke quietly. You're not organized enough for this. Ethan Cross smiled faintly. We're organized enough. Marcus shook his head slightly. No, you're copying structure without discipline. That's why your men are nervous. A small silence followed. Because it was true. Some of the men outside were breathing too heavily. Others were looking at each other for reassurance instead of forward. Even in darkness, Marcus could read them. Fear always leaks through behavior. Ethan raised his voice slightly. You always talk like you're above everyone. Marcus answered immediately. No, I talk like someone who's seen what happens when people like you get confident too early. That sentence landed differently. Not as an insult, as a warning based on experience. Ethan's smile faded slightly. Then he raised his hand. A signal, and the men around the property tightened their positions instantly. Marcus noticed. Naomi noticed too. They're preparing a push, she whispered. Marcus nodded. Yes. Elijah finally spoke from behind them. Dad, what does that mean? Marcus didn't look away from the yard. It means they're about to test the house directly. Elijah felt his throat tighten. Like, break in. Marcus answered honestly. Yes. A long silence followed that word. Then Marcus stepped backward into the house again. Not retreating, repositioning. Naomi followed quickly. We need to stop this before they commit fully. Marcus moved toward the kitchen table. It's already committed. He opened the tactical bag again and checked supplies quickly. Elijah watched every movement now. Precise. Efficient. No wasted motion. Naomi leaned closer. If they breach, we lose containment inside the structure. Marcus nodded. I know. That calm acceptance unsettled her. Because Marcus wasn't reacting like someone trying to survive. He was reacting like someone preparing to control an outcome. Elijah stepped forward. What are you going to do? Marcus finally looked at him directly. I'm going to make them hesitate. Naomi frowned. That won't be enough. Marcus paused, then said quietly, it will be if it's done correctly. Another loud crash hit the side of the house. Then another. The assault was beginning in sections now. Coordinated pressure points. Naomi moved toward the window. They're splitting attention between back and side entries. Marcus nodded. Yes, that means the front will open soon. Elijah's voice shook slightly. Open. Marcus answered without hesitation. Someone will come through. As if on cue, a loud smash erupted near the front porch. Wood cracked. A door frame shifted under impact. They were testing entry points. Ethan's voice echoed again through the rain. Marcus. Last chance. Marcus stepped toward the broken window again. Last chance for what? Ethan replied instantly. For you to remember you're not untouchable. Marcus looked toward the darkness. I never forgot I'm touchable. A pause. Then Marcus added, I just learned how to survive it. That answer seemed to irritate Ethan. Because it wasn't fear-based. It wasn't pride. It was truth. Then Ethan's tone shifted. Colder. More focused. Then let's stop talking. Immediately after that, everything changed outside. Movement increased. No more probing. No more intimidation. Execution phase beginning. Naomi stepped closer to Marcus. They're committing. Marcus nodded once. Yes. Elijah felt panic rise. What do we do? Marcus turned slightly toward him. You stay behind me. A loud crash erupted at the back door. The lock gave slightly. Wood splintered inward. Someone was trying to force entry. Naomi moved into position immediately. Marcus stayed at the center of the room. Not panicked. Not rushed. Controlled. Another hit. Then another. The back door frame was weakening fast. Elijah's breathing became uneven. Dad. Marcus interrupted softly. Listen. Elijah froze. Marcus continued. When the door breaks, you don't move until I tell you. Another strike. Cracks spread across the frame. Naomi whispered. Now. Marcus didn't move yet. He waited. Measured. Because timing mattered more than force. Another hit. And the back door finally gave way with a violent crash. A figure stepped inside immediately. Dark silhouette. Armed. Moving fast. Naomi fired instantly. One shot. The figure collapsed backward into the rain outside. Screams erupted from the yard. And in that moment, everything outside erupted fully. Gunfire intensified. Men rushed forward. Ethan's voice shouted commands. Now. The siege became full breach. Marcus moved instantly, pulling Elijah backward toward the center hallway. Naomi covered the rear. Elijah stumbled as adrenaline overwhelmed him. There inside, Marcus's voice cut through everything. Yes. Another intruder forced entry through the broken back door. Naomi engaged again. Another shot. Another collapse. But more movement followed immediately. Too many. Marcus pulled Elijah deeper into the house. This way. Elijah struggled to keep up. Where are we going? Marcus answered calmly. To change the battlefield. Naomi followed behind, firing controlled shots to slow pursuit. The house filled with chaos. Smoke. Footsteps. Shouting. But Marcus Carter was no longer reacting to chaos. He was guiding it. Because the moment someone breaches your space, you stop defending it, you start controlling where they go. And as Marcus reached the narrow interior hallway leading toward the old storage room, he finally spoke again. Quietly, almost to himself. Now they learn why you don't bring ideology into a fight with experience. Behind them, the house had fully become a war zone. And Ethan Cross was about to discover something he had underestimated from the beginning. Marcus Carter was never trapped inside that house with them. They were trapped inside it with him. The hallway narrowed as Marcus pushed Elijah forward. Every step deeper into the house felt like moving away from certainty and closer to controlled chaos. Gunfire outside continued, but now it was fragmented again, less disciplined, more reactive. That told Marcus everything he needed to know. Ethan Cross was losing cohesion. Fast. Naomi stayed just behind them, firing short, precise shots whenever movement crossed broken sightlines through the rear openings of the house. She wasn't wasting ammunition. She wasn't panicking. But even she understood the shift. The attackers had committed fully. And commitment removes flexibility. Marcus stopped at the end of the hallway near the old storage door. Elijah breathed hard behind him. "Dad, this isn't a plan," Elijah whispered. "This is getting worse." Marcus didn't turn around immediately. "It only feels worse because you can hear it now." Naomi looked at him sharply. "That's not comfort, Marcus." He nodded once. "It's not meant to be." Another loud impact shook the front of the house. The structure groaned. More entry attempts. Multiple angles now. Ethan wasn't sending a mob blindly anymore. He was coordinating pressure on all sides to force movement. Marcus placed his hand on the storage door handle. "Elijah," he said quietly. Elijah tensed. "Yes, you're going to stay here when I open this door." Elijah immediately shook his head. "No." Marcus turned slightly toward him now. This time his voice softened, but only slightly. "You don't argue this one." Elijah's breathing shook. "I can help." Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then, "No, you can't." That honesty hit harder than any command. Naomi stepped in carefully. "He's right. If things collapse inside, mobility matters. You slow him down." Elijah looked between them, frustration mixing with fear. "I'm not useless." Marcus nodded immediately. "No, you're not." A pause. Then Marcus added, "You're the reason I don't lose focus." That statement quieted Elijah instantly. Because it reframed everything. Not weakness. Anchor. Marcus opened the storage door slowly. Inside was darkness, but also preparation. Old equipment cases. Emergency supplies. A secondary exit point Marcus had reinforced long before ever moving in. Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. "You plan for worst-case entry routes." Marcus didn't answer. He stepped inside briefly and checked the back panel of the storage space. Solid. Still intact. Good. Outside, another section of the house cracked loudly as forced entry intensified. The attackers were spreading themselves thin across multiple access points now. Exactly what Marcus wanted. Naomi noticed his expression change. "You're funneling them," she said quietly. Marcus nodded once. "Yes." Elijah frowned. "What does that mean?" Marcus looked toward him briefly. "It means they think they're controlling access." A pause. "But they're actually distributing themselves into predictable positions." Naomi's expression tightened. "And you know those positions." Marcus didn't deny it. He moved back into the hallway. "They always form the same way under pressure." Another explosion of glass sounded from the living room area. Someone had entered from the front again. Naomi raised her weapon instantly. Marcus held up a hand. "Wait." Footsteps inside the house now. Real ones. Slow. Cautious. Not rushing. That meant discipline. Not Logan. Not the mob. Ethan's people. Marcus leaned slightly toward the wall, listening. One set of footsteps. Then another behind it. Two-man. Sweep. Classic clearing formation. Naomi whispered. "They're inside." Marcus nodded. "Yes." Elijah's breathing quickened. Marcus looked at him once more. "Stay behind the storage door. Don't move unless I tell you." Elijah hesitated, but nodded. Marcus stepped out into the hallway fully now. Naomi moved with him. Both of them silent. Both of them focused. The footsteps drew closer, then stopped at the intersection of the hallway. A shadow appeared at the far end. Armed silhouette. Scanning. Marcus didn't move. The attacker stepped forward slightly, trying to clear angles. Naomi aimed. Marcus raised a hand again, slightly lower this time. Still waiting. The attacker moved one step further into the hallway. And that was when Marcus acted. Not fast in a chaotic way. Fast in a controlled way. He stepped forward, grabbed the attacker's wrist, redirected the weapon upward, and struck the elbow joint sharply. The weapon clattered to the floor. Naomi secured it instantly while Marcus forced the attacker against the wall and neutralized him with precise, minimal force. No excess movement. No wasted energy. The attacker dropped unconscious within seconds. Silence followed. Then another set of footsteps reacted instantly from deeper inside the house. They heard it. Naomi looked at Marcus. They know we're here now. Marcus nodded. Yes. Elijah peeked from the storage doorway, terrified. What happened? Marcus answered calmly without looking away from the hallway. We changed their map. Another voice shouted from inside the house. Contact. Gunfire erupted immediately again, but now it was disorganized. Panicked. Ethan's structure was breaking down under uncertainty. Marcus stepped back toward Elijah briefly. You understand now? He asked quietly. Elijah shook his head slightly. No. Marcus's eyes stayed calm. They came in thinking numbers decide control. A pause. Now they're learning space decides control. Naomi reloaded quickly. And time decides survival. Another heavy crash echoed from the front room. More entry. More chaos. But Marcus wasn't reacting anymore. He was guiding the conflict toward compression points inside the house, forcing attackers into narrower zones where their coordination collapsed. And in that collapsing structure of violence, Ethan Cross was about to realize something he hadn't accounted for. Marcus Carter wasn't just defending his home. He was dismantling their entire approach to warfare, inside a space they could no longer retreat from. And for the first time that night, the hunters were starting to feel like prey. The house had become unrecognizable. Smoke hung in the air like a second ceiling. Broken wood scattered across the floor. Flashlight beams cut through darkness in unstable patterns as the attackers inside tried to regain coordination that was already slipping through their fingers. Ethan Cross stood outside the chaos for the first time that night. Watching, listening, understanding something he didn't want to accept. His men were no longer operating as a unit. They were reacting individually. And Marcus Carter was controlling every reaction point inside that structure. Ethan's jaw tightened. This is impossible, he muttered. Beside him, Logan Pike looked shaken now, no longer angry, no longer confident. Just confused and afraid. They're still inside, Logan said. We outnumber them. Just rush. Ethan cut him off sharply. No. That single word silenced him. Because Ethan had finally seen it clearly. This wasn't a fight about numbers. It was a fight about discipline. And Marcus Carter had more discipline in one breath than their entire group combined. Inside the house, Marcus moved through the hallway with Naomi covering angles behind him. Elijah stayed near the storage threshold, trembling but listening carefully to every instruction. Marcus paused for a moment. The noise outside had changed again. Slower. More distant. Naomi noticed too. They're pulling back slightly, she whispered. Marcus nodded once. Yes. Elijah looked up. Does that mean it's over? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Because he knew better. Men like Ethan Cross don't retreat out of defeat. They retreat to reassess. Then return smarter. Finally Marcus spoke. No, he said quietly. It means they're deciding whether this is worth continuing tonight. A long silence followed. Then a voice echoed faintly from outside the broken front of the house. Marcus. Ethan Cross. Calm again. Regrouped. Marcus stepped toward the doorway slowly. Naomi followed. Outside, the fire had spread but the mob had shifted backward slightly, forming a loose perimeter again. Ethan stood at the center. Controlled. Focused. But now something had changed in his eyes. Respect. Not admiration. Recognition of equal threat. You proved your point, Ethan called out. Marcus answered immediately. No, I proved yours wrong. A pause. Ethan nodded slowly. You're still dangerous. Marcus didn't deny it. So are you." That honesty hung in the air for a moment. Then Ethan spoke again, quieter this time. "This isn't finished," Marcus replied calmly. "I know." Ethan looked toward the house briefly. "You think protecting him is enough?" Marcus turned slightly toward Elijah behind him. "Yes." Ethan shook his head. "It never is." Marcus stepped forward one more step into the doorway. Then he said something final. "For me, it is." A long silence followed. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Ethan raised his hand slightly. A signal. The remaining men began backing away slowly from the property. Not defeated, not surrendered, repositioning. Because Ethan Cross wasn't leaving as someone who lost. He was leaving as someone recalculating strategy. Logan looked furious but said nothing now. The trucks eventually started. Engines roared in the distance. And one by one, they disappeared into the dark roads of Blackwater Ridge, leaving behind smoke, firelight, and silence. Inside the house, Elijah finally exhaled fully for the first time in what felt like hours. "They're gone?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded. For now. Marcus didn't relax. That worried Naomi more than anything else. Because Marcus Carter didn't mistake temporary withdrawal for safety. He turned toward Elijah. "Pack what you need," he said quietly. Elijah frowned. "What?" Marcus looked toward the window where the trucks disappeared. "They'll come back organized." Naomi stepped closer. "Marcus, federal response is already being activated. You don't need to move him." Marcus interrupted. "No." A pause. Then softer. "I'm not moving him because of fear." He looked at Elijah directly. "I'm moving him because this is no longer contained to this town." Elijah's eyes widened slightly. "What does that mean?" Marcus took a slow breath. Then answered honestly. "It means this started here, but it's connected to something larger." Naomi didn't disagree. Because she knew it too. Ethan Cross was not acting alone. And groups like his rarely are. Marcus placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "I promised your mother I would keep you safe," he said quietly. Elijah's voice shook slightly. "Are we safe now?" Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then gave the only honest answer he had. "No." A beat. Then he added, "But we're not helpless." Outside, the last truck lights faded into the distance. And somewhere far beyond Blackwater Ridge, Ethan Cross was already rebuilding what he had lost that night. Planning, recruiting, expanding. Because men like him never accept failure as final. They only accept it as temporary. And Marcus Carter knew one thing with absolute certainty as he stood in the ruins of his home. This was not the end of the story. It was only the moment both sides realized. The real war had just begun. With that said, thanks for watching and until next time.